All right, well, we are looking at the swing arms off some Gen 1 Viragos, and the reason why you may have made it to this video is because you've run into a problem with this swing arm bolt, trying to get that swing arm bolt out of there. And what's happened is over the years, rust has got in there, and that bolt has gotten rusted to the inner race for the bearings. So you may be at the point that you're like this one over here. Let me get over here and zoom in on it. So you may be at the point that you're like this one right here. Now these are some parts bike frames. This one came to me in boxes, and I wondered why they didn't try to put it back together just to see if they could get it running, or just gave up or what. But now, after looking at it, I figured out why that they stopped, because what they were trying to do is take the bike apart, clean it, get it all prepped back up, rebuild it, you know, because these are getting older and we're restoring them. And they tried to get this bolt out, but it's fused in there. And so they gave up on their project. But what we're at the point right now with this one is that somebody had tried to take the bolt out, and the bolt is fused to the bearing race. I'll show you what's inside of there in just a minute. And they backed it all the way out, and so now the bolt just spins, so it's not going anywhere. It just sits there and spins around in circles, but it's not moving anything out. In fact, they bent the flange all the way out here, so the swing arm's bent a little bit. That can be straightened back out, but they couldn't get the bolt out, so they gave up. So just what's inside of there that is holding up our progression and is potentially a showstopper for fixing one of these bikes, we'll show you on the other one. So what's inside of there that's causing all these problems? Well, this one is a good one, and so you can see the bolt backs out like it's supposed to. And so the bolt comes out and the frame comes off just like it's supposed to. Well, here's what's inside of there that's holding up the progression. So these are the caps that cover it, and inside of here is a bearing race. So it's a big race that goes all the way across. And what's happening, there's bearings inside of there too. So what's happening is the bearing race is inside of here, and the bolt is inside of there. And so what happens is that this gets fused to the bolt from rust. And it's an issue that I guess Yamaha didn't think these bikes are going to be around for 40 years, and so they wasn't really worried about putting a grease fitting in there. But there's not a grease fitting in the frame, and so this thing gets fused together, and then when you try to back the bolt out, it's stuck to it, and so all it does is just expand this, because it won't let that bolt back out because the race is in the way. So it's not so complicated why it's occurring, but it's a big deal when you're trying to take these apart. So what we got to do is figure out how to get that bolt to break free from the race, so the race can stay in there and the bolt can back its way out. So we don't really have any good ways to heat anything. If we look back over here on our bad one, we don't have any good ways to heat it, because if you just heat this outside, there's a gap in between there, and you're not going to get any heat down in there to get that rust to expand. And you can heat the end, but you're not going to put a lot of heat in. This side's already been backed out because you're at the point that you're like, oh no, now what am I going to do? You can't really put it back in there because you've damaged the threads on the ends and it won't go back in. The arm is bent, that's got to be straightened. So now you're at the point you've got to get it out. And so what a lot of folks end up doing is taking a saw and cutting right here and cutting right here, take it out, and then they replace the bolt and replace the bearing race if the bearing race is bad. They'll just replace the bolt if it's just the bolt. But I'm going to try to see if we can get this one out of here and salvage everything, because let's just pretend there's not any more of these around, and I don't have a whole couple parts bikes up in the attic that I can get pieces off of. Or I just want to take this thing out because it's frustrated me, because I spent a half a day beating on it and doing all that. So we're going to set up and see if we can get this bolt out of here. The bearing race is actually hardened on the outside. This is where the bearings run, but in the middle it's not hard. And so we could actually drill into that and it doesn't matter if you drill a hole in it, so long as the races are good on the outside. You don't want to separate it in half because then the races will move around. But you could drill a hole in it, drill a couple holes in it if you wanted to. And we need a good place that, to prevent this from ever happening again, I'd like to put a Zerk fitting in there. That way I can get me a nice little grease fitting, pump it up with grease, keep my bearings nice and greased. That way I don't run into problems with these bearings not being greased, have to take it apart to grease them. I can just hit it with the Zerk, and we could fill these guys back up with grease, and this bike's gonna last forever on these bearings. So we get set up here, and I'm gonna drill a hole right into here and drill through. What I'm gonna do that for is so I can get some heat inside of there, and I'm also gonna drill carefully right down through the center of this bearing race. That way I can get actually into the bolt. I don't want to drill into the bolt, but get to the bolt so I can put some rust breaker in there and see if we can't get this thing off. So let's get set up, and we're going to drill this. I'm going to make sure I don't go too deep so I don't drill too far into my bolt and weaken the bolt, because I don't really want to weaken the bolt. I want to keep the bolt as strong as possible. So let's get us some tape. That way I know I'm not going to drill too far down in. So that's about the thickness before I hit all the way through the bearing race. And I should see it when I hit it, but I just want to make sure I don't go too far. And there we go. I think we made it into the bolt. You should see like a little distinguishable line there. All right, so now we got a place we can put a little heat, and we also got a place we can put a little penetrant to see if we can break this bolt free. All right, so let's go get us a torch, heat this thing up, and then we'll get that bolt out there. Alright, so we got it heated up a little bit. So the first thing we're going to try is, since we drilled into the case and into the race, we ought to be able to slip the back side of our drill bit into that hole and just see if things are loosening up. So we're just going to spin it around here and see if we've made any progress on breaking that rust free. So she's still pretty solid. We can give it a tap. And you'll be able to see, if you can get any kind of movement, you'll see it inside of that little hole right there. Let's get this wedged in. Alright, so let's continue doing some torching. And we're going. So the bolt head is pretty hot now. So let's flip it around. Put a drill bit back in there. So it's down inside the pipe, down inside the hole that I put in the race. And I'm just going to take the impact grabber and I'm going to thump on it a little bit. Now, let's see if that's moved it in the hole any. So let's try to thump it again and see if we made any progress. So at the end of the day, it looks like if they're on there this bad, then you're just going to have to cut them off there. So we'll go to the last thing to get it off. Now the bearing race is right up against the side of the swing arm. And so when I cut down through there, I'm going to end up cutting a little bit of that bearing race off. This is the good one. So I'm going to need to get another bearing race, and I'll need to get another bolt. And it's also going to mess up this little cup on the end, so I'll have to get another cup. So you'd be looking at trying to find a donor to get the donor parts off of it to be able to put your bike back together. So really frustrating, And quite a bit of a showstopper here when you're trying to rebuild one of these. If it's to the point that it's spread out like this, then you don't have a lot of hope. You're just going to have to take it out. If you just tried to pull it back and it wouldn't move, you might want to put it back in there and then wait till you can acquire the parts before you take it back apart, or go on about it and then see to get the parts, because there's quite a few of these bikes around that you can get some donors. I had 2 up in the attic up there. So anyway, so we're going to cut this real quick. I'm going to go through it with an angle grinder, rotate it around, and cut the bearing race, because I don't want to cut into my swing arm. I'm going to cut the cup and the bearing race, and then I'll probably finish out with a sawzall. There we go. Now we're through the race, so all we got left is the bolt. So we'll just take the saws out and cut the bolt out. And we'll put something underneath it so stay up there for it. Now we can just come in here with the sawzall and just cut that other bolt side out. And there we go. So we got our part removed. There's the little piece of the bolt that's still in there. There we go. And we can see the threads are messed up on the end of it. But there's a little bit of thread left in that swing arm where it didn't get messed up too bad, so we should be all right with that swing arm. Be able to put our bolt back in. So now we just got to straighten out our swing arm. So all that's going to take is a little bit of hammering. There we go. So our swing arm is straight. And now, to get the culprit out of here that was all of our troubles, looks like the bearings are intact, so we didn't hurt the bearings any. They're just nasty, so the bearings will have to be cleaned. The cup, that's a washer on the inside of the cup, so if you're careful and cut just right down the edge of the cup right there, cutting into the cup just a little bit, then you don't hit the frame support and you don't mess up your bearings either. But you can see that it had gone dry and the bearing had pretty much gotten ruined with the race, so the bearing is bad in there, so I have to get those bearings out and get a new set of bearings and a new shaft and definitely a new bolt down the middle. So out of curiosity, let's just see if you can knock that guy out of there. So you can see it is frozen solid. So there you go. That's how you get one out. Fortunately, I got a good one right here, and so I'll be able to use this as my backup. That one's kind of trash. These are still good. We'll save them for later. I can run my bolt back down in there and just make sure I have enough threads to hold that. If not, this swing arm may be toast too. But well, there you go. That's what happens when you got a rusty old swing arm and you can't get the bolt off. You end up just having to cut it off there. Well, alrighty. Well, thanks for watching. Alright, so just out of curiosity, I just wanted to see what it's going to take to get that bolt out of there. And so one end, you can see where I chopped it off. The other end sticking out. So what I'm going to do is just see if I can push that bolt out of there how much force it's going to take to let me know did I ever stand a chance to get that out of there. I'm going to torque down on it in the vise. And it ain't moving right now. So we got it torqued down pretty hard. And it ain't budging. So let me just try to put some heat on it and see if I can expand the bearing race and get that thing to pop out of there. That ought to be pretty hot. Quite expanded. So let's see if it moved any. Nope, it hadn't budged a fraction. So that tells you right there that little dude was not going to come out. Cool it down. See if that moved any. Nope. Did not move at all. So, as we can see, it did not move it any at all. So odds are getting that out of there is slim to none. And I've heated it up just to try to see if I could do it. And so most likely, yeah, see I've taken the hardness off of my bearing race because I heated it up. So it's pretty much ruined. Even if you could heat it up that much on the bike, you're going to ruin the bearing races. So there we go. I guess the only way to get one off that's really rusted in there is just to cut it out.